Good evening, viewers. Today we will discuss a very difficult subject of life, which is cancer. And everybody is aware of that this is a very difficult time for the family and the family members of the patient. But today we are talking about a charity which stands with the cancer patient and with the family members. And we are honored that today our honorable guest is Chris Farrell, who is the Chief Executive of Cavendish Cancer Care Sheffield. Welcome in our show.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Chris, please tell our viewers about your early days and your education.
Okay, well, I was born in Manchester, and as a teenager, my family moved to Lake District, where I grew up. At 18, I moved to York to go to university, and I still live there today. So I studied politics, philosophy, and economics before disappointing my parents and starting in the music industry, where I worked professionally for about 4 years. At that point, realised I did need a proper job after all, and worked in financial services, training as an actuary for 3 years, before again deciding that wasn't quite for me and moving into the charity sector. Initially working in international development, then working for some national charities, and then for the last 2 years as Chief Executive of Cavendish Cancer Care.
Please tell our viewers about your interest in, first of all, you started as a student in politics and other subjects. So how you find that moving to political subject and then studying music and then to this journey, how you find this?
Well, someone referred to it as a patchwork career, and I think that's probably fairly accurate. I mean, one of the really interesting things about what Cavendish do as an organisation is we see the person first and their disease second. So for so much of the NHS, so much of the statutory services, the focus is very rightly on the diagnosis. So it's about the cancer and how to cure it, if you like. Whereas actually, when you think of what it means to live well while experiencing a cancer diagnosis, it's so much more than that. It's the emotional side of things, it's the practical side of things, it can be the financial side of things. And actually, my grounding in politics and philosophy is a fantastic base to actually think about those sorts of issues. So I went on to do a master's in political philosophy, and that was based around questions of, you know, what's right, what should people be entitled to, what should people get, how are they treated by society? And when you think about cancer, you know, some of those questions are absolutely critical because it's not just about the treatment, it's about the support you get, it's about the time you're given to come to terms with what's happening. And I think that having a background which is looked at from an academic perspective is really helpful when thinking about how we position our service in a very complex health and social care landscape to make sure we're really clear about what we're doing, how we can help people, and where are the gaps in terms of mainstream provision, particularly in terms of that view of what does it mean to live well in life, what does it mean to live meaningfully. And that's very much how I've managed to use that time, that experience within the day job.
So when you started job with them, so what was your first-hand experience?
So at Cavendish?
Yes.
Well, so after working briefly in international development, I moved to Macmillan Cancer Support, where I stayed for about 10 years. And you know, when I started at Macmillan, I was working on events. So it was essentially I was using my music background for charity. Cancer hadn't touched me particularly at that point. I lost all my grandparents before I was born to cancer, but it hadn't directly affected me. I was 27, but was keen to get on, keen to learn more. And I think over 10 years I was at Macmillan, cancer changed beyond recognition. So when you think about where we were maybe at the end of the 1990s, or even in the early 2000s, the perception of cancer was something you don't talk about. It's something that you die from, and it's something which really is about a tragedy that befalls a family. Over those 10 years, thanks to improvements in treatment, survival rates have got better and better and better. Today, more people live with and beyond cancer than die from it. But what that actually meant is that more people were recognising that living with cancer is a very complex thing for all the reasons which I just mentioned, and actually our responsibility as a charity, but also as a society, is to support people in all those different ways. And inevitably, over those 10 years, cancer touched me more personally. So I could see firsthand the difference it made when people didn't get the support they needed following a cancer diagnosis, and when people did get the support they needed. So when I joined Cavendish, it was like a breath of fresh air. So, you know, Macmillan is a fantastic organisation, but as a national organisation, there's a level of infrastructure which is inevitable. So it runs as a £200+ million business, and rightly so, and they wouldn't do what they have done without that. Cavendish couldn't be further from that. We're grounded in the community that we support. All our focus is on the people we see, and that support is provided on a one-to-one basis, face-to-face, to make sure we really understand where people are and how we can best support them.
And how you get the patient? Is NHS is referring patient to you, or you get it from the local connections? How the cancer patient are connecting with your organization?
Sure. Well, one of the really important things for us is that there's no eligibility criteria. So unlike some of the NHS services where it depends on what you've been diagnosed with and where you are currently, we see anyone affected by cancer. So that can be someone who's being diagnosed, a patient, it can be the family around them, or anyone affected by that diagnosis. And actually, interestingly today, we even see people before cancer's entered their lives. So there's a huge emphasis on screening, rightly, and a huge emphasis on cancer awareness, a huge emphasis on the genetic elements of cancer. And because of that, we get the worried well. So as a really good example, we saw a lady quite recently who was just about to turn 40 and had lost both her mum and her auntie to cancer when they were 40. So for her, she was thinking, is this my time now? Didn't want to go to a GP because she felt she'd be wasting his time, but was able to come to us and talk about her fears, get some reassurance and some support, and able to come to terms with where she was and what she needed to do. So we literally do see anybody. In terms of why they come to us, it can absolutely be their GP recommending they see us. It can be their consultant or their clinical nurse specialist, but it could just be a friend or family member. For a lot of the men we see, it tends to be the wives who are saying, you're not doing so well, you need some support. I've heard this is an organisation who can provide this support, so why don't you get in touch and see what they can do for you?
And your services, you provide treatment, equipment, therapies. So in terms of help, so what kind of help you provide to the patients?
So a key principle of what we do is being integrated with everything else that's around in Sheffield and more widely. So we don't want to duplicate what someone else does. So for us, what that means is thinking about what does it mean to get a cancer diagnosis or to hear cancer's entered your life. Now, I think for most people, it will be one of the most challenging bits of news we're ever likely to hear. And for most people, it's likely to be an acute point of crisis where just coming to terms with what's happening can be incredibly challenging. You know, someone described it to me as a bomb going off in their lives. And actually, at that very same time, they're being asked to make some of the most difficult decisions they're ever likely to make. So as a really good example, for someone diagnosed with bowel cancer, there's a number of different options in terms of how you manage that. You can have surgery, you can elect for treatment, or you can decide not to. Each of those has implications that are quite profound in terms of your life. But at a time when your head is a whirl, how are you meant to make that decision well is challenging. So that's where we come in. So I don't know if you remember a few years ago, in the 1990s, there was a television ad for Purcell, and it was Linford Christie. If you want to win like Linford, you've got to think like Linford. Positive mental attitude. And that essentially is what we do. We give people the space and the support to reflect on where they are, to think about what's happening to them, to try and come to terms with it, and to try and prioritise the decisions they need to make in order to go on to make the best possible decisions for them, whatever the eventual outcome. So we start, when someone calls us, we start by arranging an appointment within 5 working days. So we know we want to see them quickly because they're not doing well and we want to help them. We then sit down with them for about an hour to talk about what's happened to them, how it's affected them. And that's deliberately an hour because we know that in the NHS, it's a very transactional system. So, you go to your GP and you've got 15 minutes. And in 15 minutes, you can't explain to someone you've never met before how you're feeling and how it's affecting you. So we give someone the time and space to do that. So deliberately, the first half an hour is really about you talking about where you are and how cancer's affected you. After listening to that, we start to try to get to the bottom of what's the real key issue. So is it that actually the treatment's causing you some physical pain, and that means you can't sleep? Is it the anxiety which goes with a cancer diagnosis? Or is it the worry about how it's affecting those around you, your children or family? Once we understand that, we try and identify the two key issues and then agree a course of support to help you address that. So as I say, it can be a physical problem, it can be an emotional problem. But the support we offer ranges from talking therapies, so counselling, hands-on therapies, Reiki, massage, acupuncture, but it's all designed around where you are and the difference that this therapy might make to you. So our team are very experienced in terms of talking to people affected by cancer, so have a good understanding how different therapies might work.
And in terms of the treatments, the pharmaceutical companies are, obviously they are investing a lot of money. But in all over the world, why these treatments are very expensive?
Well, it's a difficult question, and it's a political question, I think. I mean, the great news is every day new treatments are coming online, which makes more people able to live longer with their cancer, either to manage that cancer or to cure it. But of course, the costs of development of those drugs are hugely expensive, and much of that development is done in the commercial world. And I think that's just a reality of where we are. So if you look internationally, you're quite right that different cancer drugs are priced at different levels depending on which country, and that causes some controversy. But I suppose for me, the important thing is actually when you hear cancer's entered your life, those big debates sort of drop out a little bit. It's more about how it's affecting you and what's happening to you, and that's really our focus. So those things are important, but for us as an organisation, we start and finish with a person who's been affected by the cancer, and to some extent let others, like Cancer Research UK is a really good example, talk to the pharmaceutical industry about their pricing policies and about the equity of that in terms of getting access to the different cancer drugs.
In terms of operations, so which area you are working at the moment? Derbyshire, Sheffield, and any other areas you're working?
Yeah, so as a point of principle, our door is always open to anyone who needs our support. And because Sheffield is a centre of excellence for cancer treatment, the reality is people come to the city for cancer treatment from across the country, and we'll see anyone who would benefit from our support. So the service we deliver is all delivered in Sheffield, but the people we see come from Chesterfield, Rotherham, Barnsley, Doncaster, and more widely. So we saw someone from Anglesey last year, we saw someone from Wolverhampton last year, and we saw someone from Lincoln.
Your organization is working for the last 25 years. So who set it up, and what is the history of this? Who set it up, this organization?
Well, we're very fortunate. We have an inspirational founder who remains our president and is still very actively involved today. So it's a chap called David Simons. He was born in Sheffield and was a dentist by profession. And what David recognised in his professional work is often when people came to see him, it wasn't what he was going to do to them that was really making them worried. It was the psychological elements of it. So he got very interested in hypnotherapy as a way of helping his patients do better through their treatment. And on the back of that, he got a national and international reputation. And actually, colleagues within Sheffield started to ask him to see their patients who weren't needing dental treatment but would benefit from hypnotherapy.
So what was his inspiration? Because everybody has inspiration in life that you are going to do certain goals.
Well, it's really interesting actually. There's a family who are still in Sheffield today, and actually it was one particular person who was his first patient, and she had breast cancer. She was struggling to cope with it in terms of what it was doing to her family, and so it was recommended she see David. And David's support made the difference between her doing well and doing very badly. And while sadly she did eventually pass away, the time she had through David's support, she said, was absolutely critical. And her challenge to him was, if this was important to me, you've got to offer it to other people. So that's where we started. It was one person's vision and one person's challenge. David then got a number of friends and colleagues to help him launch the organisation. And by all accounts, the early years was a real challenge in terms of getting the medical profession to recognise the value of complementary therapy, of getting patients to recognise why it might benefit from them.
Have you ever thought to connect your charity with the international, like in Pakistan, Imran Khan, the great cricketer?
Absolutely.
He has set up Shaukat Khanum, which is one of the great cancer hospital. Have you ever thought to connect your charity with the international organizations?
It's something which we would love to do, and the reality is cancer affects everyone. I think that our challenge is, as I say, we were started by one person's vision, and today we're still a local independent organisation. So there's a capacity issue, but we've recognised that actually we want to provide the best possible support to everyone we see and use what we've learned to make sure that anyone else around the world gets the same quality of support. And that's about building those bridges. So certainly, those are the conversations we need to have.
Or set up a memorandum of understanding for the training the staff or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was inspired by a book by the American surgeon Atul Gawande, Being Mortal. And that's a fantastic example of a clinical specialist talking about cancer in terms of how it's affected him and his family, and the fact that actually in many ways it's about living well that's the most important thing, not necessarily the treatment. And of course, Atul's background, he's from India, his family are from India, he's from America, his family are from India, and still has strong links there. And he talks about the experience of cancer in different communities around the world. And it's, as I say, I found it inspirational, and I think there's certainly more which we could learn from by building those links better, including in Sheffield.
Chris, we are entering into the last few moments of this show, but what is your message for our viewers who are watching this show today?
Well, I think I've got two messages. The first one is that for anybody to receive any benefit at all, they have to know about us and they have to understand why we might be relevant to them. And that's about talking. So if your viewers are affected by cancer, or if they know someone who's affected by cancer and they think they might need some support, then please do encourage them to get in touch with us. As I said earlier, we give people the space and the time and the support to engage effectively with everything else that's happening. How we do that varies by the person, but it's all about that person, so please do come and have that conversation. And I guess the second sort of challenge is really about different communities across Sheffield. We know that Sheffield is a very unequal city, and we know that not everyone who would benefit from our support is currently getting it. And so, as you said, we're 25 years old and we're celebrating everything we've done over those last 25 years and the 20,000 people we've helped. But our challenge really is to move from helping those who can find us themselves to helping those who aren't doing well in terms of statutory provision and who would benefit most from our support. And I think very much there are a whole series of communities across Sheffield where we would love to talk to more, love to have the chance to demonstrate what we do firsthand so they can see the difference it might make, and to help us learn how we can do that better ourselves, because we won't get it right and we will learn a lot from talking to those people and those communities.
Chris, thank you very much, because we are very close to the end. So thank you for joining. Viewers, I hope you have enjoyed today's show. Keep watching Sheffield Live. Thank you.